We're here at the Althorpe estate today to talk to Lord Spencer about his association with Cynthia Spencer on this, its 45th anniversary year. Lord Spencer, thank you so much for having us here today. Can I just begin by asking you, what does Cynthia Spencer Hospice mean to you?
Well, Cynthia Spencer Hospice has always been a part of my life, I think. I can remember it being founded and the honour of having it named after my grandmother. And it's something that I've always been sort of connected to ever since, particularly I think since about 1989 when I think I started to become more directly involved in it. But to me, Cynthia Spencer Hospice is a sort of place of excellent care for the people who are sent there, but also for their families. It's something that Northampton should be very proud of.
Why is it important for you to be the patron of Cynthia Spencer Hospice?
Well, I'm delighted to be patron of the hospice, and it's something that I feel a strong connection to. I was very close to my grandmother, who it's named after, so it's nice to have that connection for me personally. But also what an honour it is, generally, to be associated with something, a centre of such excellence and care in the community. My family's always been very tightly bound with Northampton. And this is a lovely way for me, I find, for me to be involved with something as special as Cynthia Spencer.
What is your first memory of visiting the hospice?
I think the first memory I have was when it was being opened by the Queen Mother, so quite a long time ago. And it was a very important family occasion for us to have Cynthia Spencer named after a much-loved member of my family, and for it to be blessed, as it were, by the Queen Mother, who is such a respected figure in the nation, of course. So I remember that day very well, and endless cousins coming out of the woodwork to be part of it. So yes, it was one of those family occasions. Yeah.
Are there any particular moments from your visits over the years that have stuck with you?
Yes, I remember about 30 years ago, I did a programme on it actually for ITV for This Morning, and got to know some of the people who were facing their end at Cynthia Spencer, as well as the people working there. And I remember this great link between my daughter Kitty, who's 30 now, as a baby. She had a particular connection to one of the ladies who, they just had that sort of moment between them where this lady, who was clearly not well at all, was holding a baby, and it was the sort of end of life, beginning of life sort of thing, and I found that very moving.
Are there any particular patients that you've met during your visits that you remember strongly?
Yes, there was a wonderful older lady who I met in the early 90s called Odette, and she had this incredible dignity. She was very excited. I think she was the very first person who had aromatherapy at Cynthia Spencer, which was a big breakthrough then. And to me it showed the innovative way in which Cynthia Spencer looked after people. And she was tickled pink to be getting this treatment, and it really helped her actually. And I remember her quiet dignity, really. She was a wonderful lady.
Has anyone close to you ever received care at the hospice?
Well, a lot of people who've worked here have gone to the hospice, and I've visited them there when I can. I remember the last time we had a gardener who worked endlessly on the lawns behind me for about 40 years or so. And I went to see him, and he was so touched by how well he was being looked after. And also he had been very close to my grandmother, Cynthia Spencer, so it meant an enormous amount to him. He'd worked very closely with her. So yes, I mean, I think anyone who lives in Northampton or Northamptonshire has connections with Cynthia Spencer, which explains why it's such a loved part of our community.
What message would you give to the hospice care team and volunteers on reaching the milestone of 45 years of care?
Well, I think it must be a wonderful team to be part of, because they must feel every day the value of their work. And over 45 years, I mean, I think, first of all, congratulations to everyone who's worked there, because it's done so much for so many people. I've heard so many times from people that they as a family have had so much understanding and support at the most difficult of times. So I think it's an anniversary to be celebrated, and it's very important for people to realise how important their work is. It really does mean an enormous amount to people when they're at the most vulnerable.
What do you think your grandmother would think now the hospice is celebrating its 45th year of caring for people in the community?
My grandmother was a very modest lady, and there are very few people who can remember her now because she died a long time ago, in 1972. But I think if she came back, she'd be very proud that it's going, she'd be unbelievably touched that it carries her name. But I think, you know, when I bump into people who knew the original Cynthia Spencer, they say how caring she was. She lived in this house at a time of 98% taxation. So she used to beetle around the county in a little Austin. But I hear from people that they remember her visiting when their families were ill. So in a way, I think she's a very appropriate person for it to be named after, and I think she'd be very touched that her name's been associated with it for so long.